Okay, so now let's look at how we clean batteries. All right, so we can have dirt, we can have grease, we can have corrosion. All right, if you look here, dirt and grease can form a conductive path between the terminals and drain the battery, which we saw in that leakage test. Gassing will deposit sulfuric acid, which will corrode the battery terminals, cable clamps, and the hold down. So the best way to remove, well, it's best to remove the battery from the vehicle to clean it for natural reasons. None of this corrosion and yuck and runoff is going to end up getting onto the vehicle if the battery's not in it. And then naturally, by taking the terminals off the battery, we can clean inside those areas as well. Right? So we want to make sure the battery's properly seated in the tray when replacing it. We want to make sure that it's not going to rock or move around. We don't want to over tighten the hold down fixture. We don't want to distort it. We want to install the positive cable, then the negative cable. We want to observe the polarity. We want to confirm a good connection with the terminal test. I'm going to come back here for a minute. The way we clean this is baking soda and water. Right? We're going to take it, we're going to put it on. It's going to get all green and gooey and disgusting looking. We rinse it off. We clean it with a little bit of a brush, and we end up with a clean battery. You know, Coca-Cola eats that battery acid also. Think about that for a second. You're drinking it, and it dissolves battery acid. Just saying. Right, so last thing here, jump starting. Make sure the two batteries aren't touching each other. If they're touching each other, guess what? You just share the ground between the two of them. So you want to make sure the two vehicles are apart. Well, the reality is there's not too many cars with metal bumpers anymore, right? You got to have metal bumpers for that to work. But anyway, engage parking brakes. Make sure the transmission's in park or neutral. Turn off the ignition switch on both vehicles. Attach one end of the positive jumper cable to the disabled battery positive terminal. Connect the other end of the positive terminal to the booster battery's positive terminal. Attach the one end of the negative jumper cable to the booster battery's negative terminal, and then attach the other end of the cable to the disabled engine on the ground away from the battery. Okay, so the last connection doesn't get put on the negative terminal. It's connected to the metal structure around it, so the spark happens on that last connection away from the gases that came out of that battery because it was drained. Start the jumper vehicle and run it at a fast idle. Attempt to start the disabled one. Once the vehicle starts, remove the ground connected to the engine block. Disconnect the negative cable from the booster vehicle. Disconnect the positive jumper cable from the booster battery, and disconnect the positive jumper cable from the other battery. And last thing I want to tell you when it comes to this battery stuff is memory savers. So these are things that plug into the cigarette lighter and will retain the memory of the computer, the radio stations, the clock, that kind of stuff. What you need to realize is if you use one of these, the positive and negative cables are still alive, so to speak. So you have to make sure you insulate that positive cable so it doesn't ground against the metal of the car. This one goes through the cigarette lighter, and that only works is if the cigarette lighter stays powered when the car is off. This one plugs into the OBD connector and it back feeds power through the power feed that's present in pin 16. That will back charge the whole car and keep everything alive. They're great to use, but you have to respect the fact that that positive cable is alive. What I do is I take a rubber glove and I stick the cable into a rubber glove, and this way it's insulated.